Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We have a special guest here today. Heather is one of the leaders here at Real Food Recovery. But before I get to her, I want to make sure to say hello to my partner, Jamie. How's it going?
Hi, good to be here. Very excited to have Heather here with us today.
I know she is a gem. So, before I say too much about her, I'm actually going to let her talk about her, but just know that we are extremely, extremely lucky to have Heather. She is very valuable to our leadership team and brings a lot to the table. So she really takes us to the next level in our real food recovery community. So again, we just can't say enough about how grateful we are to have her. So Heather, I'm going to turn it over to you. Let's hear about you from you.
Thank you. And thank you, ladies, for having me on and just the privilege of working with you. It's just been amazing. So I was thinking about this the other day. I told this story a lot, but I love telling it because it helps me to remember my why and how far I've come.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, things started when I was 11 or puberty, as far as when it was in my awareness. And I noticed how much I would eat, especially now looking back, processed food. And not only would I eat a lot, but it was constantly on my mind. And it was embarrassing because I saw that I ate more than my friends. I even ate more than their fathers, and I would be finished before everybody else. And so around that time period of 11, and then when I was 15 and 16, I remember when I was in high school, I became really ashamed of my weight. So I started restricting or what I thought was dieting. And I even remember only eating like 1 can a day of cranberry sauce and then counting calories and being obsessed about it and running. Next thing you know, I would be uncontrollably binging and feeling terrible, thinking I was a loser, just all these feelings of shame. I had discovered diet pills. I started taking those. Um, I did lose a bit of weight, but then couldn't keep it off, and it was like a vicious cycle. And then I started having really bad stomach pain from binging, and not just because I was uncomfortably full, but just horrible, horrific pain. And then I started vomiting. And what I noticed from the vomiting was that I could seemingly control my weight or at least prevent it from a lot of it coming on. So that was going on and off. And then years later in my 20s, when I had a newspaper business at the time, and I was just under an enormous amount of stress. I was getting up in the middle of the night for work. I was really binging a lot and then over exercising for hours a day and then binging and purging. And that cycle came back worse than ever. So then I went to a doctor and told him about it. And then he referenced or referred me over to Linden Oaks, which was a hospital for eating disorders and other issues. And so they evaluated me and came back with I needed inpatient care. It was going to cost $50,000. Now, mind you, this was in the 90s. So that's a lot. And for 4 to 6 weeks of care. And at the time, I didn't have health insurance. I had small kids and a business. So I told them I couldn't do it. So they suggested inpatient care. So I saw a registered dietitian, a psychiatrist, group therapy, and a therapist for a year. And I did this weekly. I drove to all 4 separate locations every week for a year. I remember it cost me around $13,000, which is not bad if it had worked, and it had worked somewhat, but I still had a problem with binging.
Mm-hmm.
So then, and their whole premise is intuitive eating. So we know how that works. Okay. So,
Okay.
and that was
Do you
kind
want
of,
to say a sentence about that?
yeah. So intuitive eating is based on Ellen Tribole. I think right around that time in the 90s is when she came out with her book and workbooks around intuitive eating. And conventional medicine, ended up adopting this treatment program of intuitive eating, and is basically about not restricting foods, allowing yourself to eat whatever it is that you want, using some mindfulness, and there's different techniques that are used in the book and workbook. You know, how you talk to yourself, basically what they called their inner family work, and they labeled them the police officer and all these different names for inner people inside of you. Interesting thing is, when I do something, I do it to the letter. So I did it to the best of my ability, and it worked for me. I would come back to group because they would give you homework assignments such as, well, go and eat, 2 cookies. I was like, okay, I would eat 2 cookies and end up eating the whole thing by the end of the night, and then some, a pizza and everything else. And I would come back and, oh, you didn't do it right. You need to go back to workbook, chapter 5, and so on. So it was really frustrating. Years later, then I tried other diets and thinking diets were the cure. And then I tried keto for 2.5 years. I even got certified as a keto coach, did that. But then on the weekends, the keto treats would come in, and I'm binging on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then next thing you know, didn't see this at the time, but I was having more and more food intolerance and sensitivities. So then I discovered carnivore website, and even followed a particular influencer and did that for 5.5 months. And then the binge purge cycle came back with a vengeance. And then also affected my health. I had terrible skin issues. I developed gout. I got to the point I couldn't even eat lettuce without having pain and blood sugar issues. So hormones were in the toilet. It was a mess. Mm-hmm. So then to get myself out of it, I went back to intuitive eating and tried that. The binging did stop, the voracious binging, because probably I was getting calories that my body needed or whatever else. But I still didn't have control, and I was starting to put on weight, and that was scary to me. So then I went back to, actually before that, I ended up finding a recovery group. It was actually from Dr. Joan Ifland. So I did join that group. It helped tremendously. And she's the one that helped me, understand the whole mirror neuron concept and put that on the map. And that helped a lot. But I still had problems with overeating. And I actually, after 1.5 years of being on the program, I went and had some blood work done twice, as a matter of fact. And so even being on a clean food plan that was low carb, and then I did clean keto, I developed gout again. I had high ferritin, low white blood cell count. And then the doctor I was seeing wanted me to go to a hematologist for a bone marrow biopsy, which really scared me. Right around the same time, and I'm praying about this the whole time, right around the same time I heard Jamie's story, her recovery story, and it just resonated with me. There were so many similarities in hearing her whole journey. She did keto, low carb, all of that. And then she started the whole food plant-based lifestyle. My ears perked up, and I'm like, wait a minute here. I'm having health issues despite eating clean for 1.5 years. What's going on? So I talked with her. And I was so glad I did, because I felt like we became soul sisters after that, for sure. Mm-hmm. But it saved my life, I have to say, because I found a whole food plant-based doctor after that. And then I did it for 3 months, and he retested me, and everything was normal after that. And I was like, okay, not only am I not overeating anymore and having cravings, and even anemia that I had issues with since I can remember had cleared up. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. So now moving forward till today, and now I'm in real food recovery with both of you ladies. And now I feel like this is like an undergraduate program, and I've leveled up in a way I never imagined in recovery, because recovery just isn't about the food. of course. It's about the emotional work, the mental work, all of that. So, and that's where I am now. And, I have to give thanks to God, and just the timing of how this group came together was in his timing, and it was perfect.
Yes, yes, yes. And we are thrilled to have you here. When Paige and I were creating Real Food Recovery, I just kept saying, Heather, I'm so hopeful that she comes our way, because I knew that what you brought to the table, not only from your knowledge and your education, but from your experience and the way that you approach your own recovery, very vulnerably, it's very inspiring. And I was so glad when it all worked out. So you've had a really remarkable history with recovery. You've dealt with big challenges, Heather. Tell us more about how these experiences, or what experiences, have impacted your recovery. And do you view these challenges as a bad thing, or how do you view them?
This is a great question, because recently, I've had a lot of challenges. Of course, I mean, in life, we're just going to have challenges. That's just what happens. It's part of life. But I've had probably some of the biggest challenges that I've ever dealt with while I was in recovery. And one of them included resigning from a job recently, and something that was near and dear to my heart, that was really hard, and probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But what I did was, I was not fearful, but relying on God the whole time to get me through. And of course, that was the case. But it's interesting how once you come down off of stress, because stress can be addictive too. I mean, you're getting that whole cataclysmine cocktail of dopamine, adrenaline, and cortisol, and we can get addicted to that. And once I was not on that high of stress, I had all of these underpinnings of different things that I needed to work on that all came to the surface. It was like I was experiencing withdrawal. I at first called it grief, and I believe some of it was, don't get me wrong, because I really loved what I did and the people and all of that, but it was also withdrawal from stress. So that was a huge challenge. And I was so glad to be part of this recovery community, because it allowed me to be my authentic self. And it also, this group focuses on values and self-discipline, self-resourcing, and self-leadership, which helped me overcome these types of challenges. But honestly, I see the challenge when it comes up as an opportunity to grow, to level up, to learn, but also to rely on God, to connect with the pain, gently search the meaning of it. And I've always remembered that when we're comfortable, we're not growing. So I'm like, this is an opportunity for me to grow. So I have a particular thing that I do is something called use the difficulty. I use the difficulty. So I shift my mindset, and I find the reward right now, because we are reward based. We're reward centered. We want gratification right now. This is one of the reasons why withdrawal is so hard for people, or overcoming obstacles without, leaning on some type of addiction is so hard, because we are reward based. So I look for the reward right now. So how I do that is I center myself. I ask myself questions. What's good about this situation right now? What are the glimmers in my life right now, today? What is this teaching me? How can I use this challenge to my advantage? And if this were happening to my good friend and I picture them, what would I say? What would I say to them? And what can I do right now for myself? What do I need? So when I do that, it helps me. It really takes the sting off the pain.
Beautiful process, beautiful process. And I think that, that's an example of you turning around something that, caused you a lot of, it could have derailed you, and it didn't. You didn't let it. So it doesn't sound like you're viewing these challenges as a bad thing. You've used them as, like you said, opportunities for growth, and opportunities for the ability to see how you could make a difference in your life in a new way, from a new perspective. I just love it. Way to go. So all this makes me think about where discipline ties into your story. Do you see a strong connection between discipline and recovery?
Absolutely. You can't have a strong recovery without discipline. I know people hate that word,
Well,
but
they're intimidated by it, right?
yes, exactly. I've actually had people tell me don't use that word.
Interesting.
And I give the analogy of braces. My son, very crooked teeth.
Okay.
We took him to have braces put on, and the orthodontist explained the whole process. It's going to be uncomfortable. Sometimes you might have some pain.
Yep.
But discipline and applying self-discipline to yourself is like having braces on. We need to correct some things, and that's the only way we're going to move and grow and move forward. And I've even researched this extensively, and it's definitely a pivotal, important skill that helps someone to be able to develop other skills.
Yes.
Other skills that I value, such as perseverance and resilience, being committed, stamina, even self-motivation, self-confidence, being organized, and even autonomy. Because I love your saying that you have in RFR, discipline now, freedom later. Being disciplined now gives me autonomy later.
Absolutely.
And that's where real freedom is. But so basically, in essence, it's just a fundamental skill for success. And I know without it, I wouldn't be able to emotionally regulate,
right,
or manage my emotions and behavior. I used to be all over the place doing whatever I wanted to, but I was miserable. And then, in order to set and achieve goals, you needed and overcome challenges and staying focused and helping impulse control.
That's right. That's very true.
Do you think that vulnerability is a part of recovery? And do you think that discipline and vulnerability are related?
Oh, I love that word.
I do too.
Right?
I do too.
I'll tell you why. I came across this word. I remember there was a registered dietitian I was seeing about 6 years ago. And she gave me the recording to Brene Brown's talk on vulnerability. And, she addressed it as a superpower, and I was blown away because that's who I am. And I felt like it gave me permission to be who I am. I show up in this world authentic. And, vulnerability is so essential for growth and success and recovery. And I looked up the definition recently, and basically it's your willingness to be open, expose yourself to the possibility of being rejected, failing, or being disappointed. So it involves, in essence, taking some type of risk, which can be scary. But if you're being authentic and being your honest self with yourself and with others, that's vulnerability.
Exactly.
And I remember Brene Brown said something to the effect of it leads to greater resilience and to a more authentic life. It does. And every one of my relationships has improved. I used to have terrible relationships, but every one of them has improved because of me being vulnerable. Once I did that. And that, to tie it in, takes self-discipline to be vulnerable that way.
And don't you think you tap in a little bit to who your trusted resources are, to who you can be vulnerable with. I mean, don't you think that's part of it too? That's on us.
Perfectly said. Absolutely. I remember I came across this meme. I had gotten hurt in a relationship not too long ago. I think it was last year. And at first, I went to pain and was upset. And I said, you know what? I got to take ownership of my side here. And I came across this meme, and it had 4 different categories of friends. It was acquaintance, casual friend, close friend, and intimate friend.
That's right.
And me, I show up in this world. My little girl just loves everybody and wants everybody to be my intimate friend. That's just not healthy, and it's not healthy boundaries. So I took a boundaries workshop. I think it was last year, the year before last. It was a 3-week workshop, and it was amazing. And I learned it's okay to have boundaries with people. I don't have to be vulnerable with everybody.
That's
But in relationships that mean something to me, I do. I really do. So, I can have healthy boundaries around who to be vulnerable with.
Yeah.
Love that.
Amazing. So Heather, you've done a tremendous amount of work around gut microbiome, tremendous amount of studying, education, exposing yourself to thought leaders and teachers, educators in this area. You bring a lot to Real Food Recovery around nutrition education and nutrition coaching, and coaching around how food affects our gut microbiome, which is, as we're learning, is our second brain. So how does, in your education, how does the gut microbiome relate to addiction?
I love this topic. Thank you for having this. I just finished a 7-week course from Dr. Will Bulsiewicz. He is MD and specialist gastroenterologist, New York Times bestseller of Fiber Fuel. I tell you, this course, I finished the main course, but there's still hundreds of videos I have to go through. It's the most comprehensive course. And what I really appreciate about what I learned, everything was backed up with heavy duty studies, not flim flam studies where you're trying to make things fit your agenda. That is not him. He is talking about authentic. I love it. So anyway, to answer your question, I want to start off with this. There's so much emphasis being put on protein. That's all you hear about. It's the catchword: protein, protein, protein. And protein is an essential macronutrient, but 97% of Americans get enough protein. And as a matter of fact, the research shows that most people overeat protein thanks to the protein powder industry, which, believe it or not, their sales are $25 billion a year. So they've been really trying to sell and promote this protein, protein, protein. So that being said, what's really lacking is fiber. And I remember watching this talk a couple of years ago by anthropologists, and they mentioned that our ancestors ate around 100 grams of fiber a day. 100. Now, the average person now in this country eats 15 grams of fiber a day. That's minuscule. And then the recommended amount for women is 25, and for men is 35. But the research shows for colon cancer prevention is 50 grams a day. 50 grams, which is quite a bit. So that right there, just for health reasons, we need fiber, which we don't hear that much about. I mean, we might hear about Metamucil or take this product, but not fiber from plants. We don't hear about that. So the research also shows, and how this can tie in with addiction and recovery, is that stress can manifest in the gut. And believe it or not, there's over 30 neurotransmitters that are produced in the gut. And what's exciting is the vagus nerve is located very close to the gut. So the gut talks to the brain, actually puts in a phone call, and it uses the vagus nerve to do that. And that's the wandering nerve. It's the main nerve in our body, and it's responsible for sending signals, keeping motor balance, digestion, involuntary, sensory. Very important. But it sends this information to the brain. And it's also linked to not only stress, but anxiety and fear. So one of the main neurotransmitters that's very important in having a successful recovery is serotonin. And we hear about serotonin. Serotonin is the happy neurotransmitter. So when your gut bacteria or microbiota is what it's called, is out of balance in the gut, the healthy bacteria will have a hard time creating serotonin and the other neurotransmitters. The other important neurotransmitters, GABA. We don't hear anything really about GABA, and that's really important because GABA is what helps us go to sleep at night. It helps us to feel calm. It helps control feelings of fear and anxiety. And then another important neurotransmitter is glutamate, which is great for motivation and focus. And then there's dopamine, which is part of the reward system and pleasure. So all of those are made in the gut. So if you don't have enough healthy gut bacteria, and you're not producing enough serotonin, GABA, dopamine, and glutamate in the gut, the brain will create cravings to compensate for that. So, and then the other issue is if you have a plethora of bad bacteria from the imbalance, that's also going to stimulate the vagus nerve to put in the phone call to the brain to create cravings as well. It's amazing. So this is one of the reasons why, and here's the case in point, when I was doing a particular diet that was meat only, which was all animal protein, I was still binging, having cravings. And if protein was supposed to get rid of all the cravings, why was I having cravings for processed food and eating it like crazy? And then, of course, it just got worse and worse and worse.
Exactly.
And that's because I wasn't feeding my good bacteria the fiber it needed
to send the signal that it had what it needed.
Exactly. That's what was going on.
That is huge. People are so focused and scared of cravings. What I'm learning in this phase of my recovery from you and others is that once you give your body the nourishment it needs, the nutrients it needs, the microbiota, what it needs, it's able to send different signals. And yes, when you pull, and by the way, processed foods do not give our microbiome what it needs.
No.
It has
if anything, it just, if you're not eating enough fiber,
right,
your good bacteria is dying off, and now you're having the bad bacteria replicating, and now the ultra processed food is fertilizer for the bad bacteria.
It's Animal House in there. It's Animal House in there.
Exactly. And guess what? You're going to eat like an animal, feel like an animal. That's just
room.
That's what it felt like when I was out of control. So the number one predictor of a healthy gut microbiome, and this part's important because 70% of the immune system is in the gut.
Yeah. So
that's very important. But the number one predictor of a healthy gut microbiome is having diversity of plants in our diet. Every plant has fiber. And here's one of the amazing points I learned. Every plant has its own unique fiber. Beautiful. And we have 39 trillion microbes in our gut. And each of these microbes prefer a different type of fiber. So if we're getting, and the research shows is very clear, 30 different types of plants in a given week, then we are going to have a beautiful garden of healthy bacteria in our gut. And it's going to repay us by giving us the neurotransmitters that we need, and satiating hormones that are really important that get developed too. That's also the case. So what are some of the signs of a healthy gut? Well, actually, when you're able to consume whole foods in abundance and without restriction.
Yeah.
You're not just tolerating the food, you're actually enjoying it. And we've all heard of that term called leaky gut. So when the gut is damaged, you'll start to have food sensitivities and intolerances.
Yeah.
That's a clear indication that you have an unhealthy imbalance in the gut microbiota there.
Right.
And then some symptoms would include gas and bloating and constipation. Those are the three most popular ones. You might have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, maybe skin rashes, and also affect your mood too. And one of the great things I learned, I used to think constipation was just having trouble going to the bathroom or not going to the bathroom. But actually, it's not having 2 or 3 bowel movements a day that are full and complete.
Exactly.
That if you're not having that, and you could even have diarrhea and it's considered constipation.
Right.
So that's an indicator of we need more plant diversity here. So, and it's important because hormones, metabolism, digestion, immune system, these are all affected when we don't have a healthy gut.
And you're saying that, are you saying that we don't need a diversity of dairy and meat
No,
to have a healthy gut microbiome?
no. And that's a whole other show we could talk about with what that does to the gut microbiome. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But no, plants is it. Plants is where it's at.
Got it.
I love that the talking about the different neurotransmitters too, and I hope you'll come back. And we need to do a whole podcast on GABA and all those other neurotransmitters that I think.
Oh yeah, it's so important. You know, I understand serotonin. Serotonin is the darling child of all the neurotransmitters, but honestly, GABA they're all key players. They really are, but GABA is really not been given its due recognition. It's important.
Yeah, I want to learn more about that because it is under discussed.
Yeah.
Under acknowledged. Lastly, you're very involved in the neurodivergent arena. Does that have an effect on food addiction and eating disordered behaviors? And can you even explain a little bit more about what neurodivergence is?
Absolutely. This is another wonderful topic. I started working with a doctor who actually taught me about highly sensitive. According to Elaine Aaron, she has a website and many wonderful books on what being highly sensitive is, or having a highly sensitive nervous system. I started working with him back in 2008 and learned all about it. And he trained me, and we worked with highly sensitive individuals, individuals on the spectrum, as well as autoimmune like lupus and fibromyalgia and whatnot. So highly sensitive are people that they are very empathic, physical pain, emotional pain, they're sensitive to. They're very caring individuals, and neurodivergence is basically just a term, an umbrella term, and would include people that are on the spectrum, like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, Tourette syndrome, developmental disabilities, misophonia, which I think almost everybody in my household has. It's the noise, you know, when someone's chewing or noise, it's just super loud. And then highly sensitive people are also neurodivergent. But, you know, studies have shown, there are many studies on this, that women, children, and even males that have eating disorder behaviors have tested positive for ADHD and autism. And I have found in the tons of people that I've worked with have had either diagnosed ADHD or autism or some type of neurodivergence. They seem to come in tandem. And this is why not everybody on the planet has food addiction or an eating disorder, because not everybody on the planet is neurodivergent. As a matter of fact, neurotypical would be the opposite of neurodivergence. And neurotypical, to kind of give you a word picture, it would be like, my phone is Apple, Apple operating system. And then the other operating system is Android. Or with computers, you have Windows and you have Macintosh. So you have two different operating systems. So one would be neurotypical and the other one would be neurodivergent.
What are some examples of neurotypical?
Neurotypical. That's a great question. It would be someone who does not have a highly sensitive nervous system. So you will know those people. They could eat a cookie or two and not be obsessing about eating anything else. And we all know those people. Or I know for myself, everybody that I know that's highly sensitive, they have some type of sensitivity to, they don't like tags in their clothes. Their clothes have to feel a certain way. The opposite neurotypical person is like, whatever, I can put on sandpaper and I'm okay with it. So yeah,
I think also the way neurodivergent folks like me, we process things like
yes.
Paige laughs still because we were talking about, she's like, don't you just sort of like, this happened and you feel it and you move on? And I'm like, no, I'm like, I feel it. Like,
there you go.
Part of me, I feel it. And she's like, okay. Husband, same way. My husband's like, oh, moving on, compartmentalized, we're moving on. And I'm like, no, it's just such a difference between he's Windows, I'm Mac.
That's right. That's it. That's exactly what it is. And the reason why this is important, because think about it, knowledge is power. Before I found out, I thought it was me. I'm defective because I had neurotypical people tell me it was all me. Nobody else is like this. What is wrong with you? You're too sensitive. And so I thought that it was very shaming. But once I learned on this and learned all I could about it, and then actually worked with individuals, like I mentioned back when I was working with this doctor and now in recovery, I see that, wow, and with more and more information coming out about it, it's not that we need to be fixed. We just need to learn how to navigate a neurotypical world. And those are two different things. There's nothing wrong with us. As a matter of fact, I love Gabor Mate's version of it. He says he doesn't like to use sensitive. He calls it gifted. And basically, I know Elaine Aron called it the same thing. It's a gift. What we have is a gift, and we just need to learn how to hone our skills and be able to, we don't have to live in a bubble. We can learn how to live in this world and function in it and have a fulfilling life.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Beautiful. So Heather, one of the many reasons we wanted you on for this discussion. So freeing and so important. So thank you so much. So many of our members and so many of our community in general that aren't even RFR members yet, but they're in the community of addiction, right? Of food addiction, processor or behavior or substance addiction. They have this deep shame. They have this deep disconnection from themselves because they have been told by and we're not trying to divide people here by folks that don't understand how they're wired. They've been told there's something wrong with them. So they internalize that shame. They eat over it. They drug over it. They drink over it. They gamble and shop over it. All of it. But really, what it comes down to is understanding that you are the yin to the yang. You cannot have a world without both neurotypical and neurodivergent.
Right.
You cannot. Yes. So, the way that I like to look at it is I don't want to dive too deeply into my neurodivergence. I know I have it. I understand it. I'm looking for ways to own it and to get to know it better instead of shunning it and having it run me, so to speak. So such an important topic. Thank you for bringing it in.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you were here, but we don't want to let you go yet. We've got a few listener questions, if you wouldn't mind answering those. The first one is, do I have to restrict carbs or do some type of low carb diet to get control of cravings? I think this is a pretty common misconception. So if you could address that
Oh
would
my goodness.
really
There's even one particular person, leader, that says you can't be in recovery unless you do low carb, which is ridiculous. I have been, successful in recovery. Jamie has, there's many people that I know who aren't low carb and are successful. But
Love my carb.
I thought the same thing too at one time. I really did, because I was taught that, and I really didn't look into peer-reviewed research on it. I really didn't. And whole food carbs are very healthy to eat. And I think there's a problem in the world with all or nothing thinking and demonizing something. And yes, refined, ultra-processed carbs, you eat that, you're not going to get control of cravings when you have such a sensitive system like we do. But whole food carbs are very healthy to eat. And I don't mean just lettuce. I mean, just having that plant diversity. Right? That is how we get a healthy, robust gut microbiome. I have to give a personal brief experience really quick. After, I think it was 6, 7, 8 months, I had been doing whole food plant-based. I lived with my oldest son, his wife. I think we had 6 of us total living in the house together during the pandemic. My family got COVID twice around me, 2 different strains around me. They were not quarantining. I know I was taking care of my son. He's coughing on me. Also, I didn't get COVID. I didn't get COVID for 3 years, and they had it twice.
Wow.
And it wasn't until I had an infection, a mouth infection, and this particular periodontist put me on 3 different antibiotics. 2 of them are for Lyme and malaria. They were really strong, wiped out my gut microbiome. And within 3 months, I had gotten COVID.
Yep.
So there's something to say about having a healthy gut microbiome versus not.
Yeah.
Totally.
For sure.
And I had done the keto for a long time, and then I decided to start adding carbs back in to my and you know what? Didn't affect my weight at all.
No.
In fact, I'm probably happier having apples and steel cut oats and carrots.
Oh yeah, I'm actually leaner than I've been in decades, and I eat a very high carb carbohydrate. And one of the things too that I learned in that course is that, we know glucose regulation is done within the muscles. We know that. But a lot of glucose regulation is done in the microbiome by healthy gut bacteria. So when we don't have the healthy gut bacteria that we need, then we have all this excess glucose circulating around in the bloodstream and the need for more insulin. I'm now insulin sensitive. We're taught that once you're insulin resistant, you'll always be insulin resistant. And the only way around insulin resistance is low carb. And that's not true.
It's not true.
You become sensitive to insulin again by eating whole food carbs and having plant diversity. And I remember when I was doing carnivore, I couldn't eat any fruit. Are you kidding me? There's no way.
Couldn't even look at a peach.
No. And I remember when I first introduced it back in, a handful of blueberries, my body went crazy and my glucose shot up. Now I could eat watermelon, bananas, grapes, no problem. And as a matter of fact, I don't even care for it because it's so sweet, really.
Right.
I prefer other types of fruits, but I'll throw a couple in and it's no big deal. And before it would send me off the rails.
Yeah.
But because of having a healthy gut microbiome, and I'm insulin sensitive now, I can eat that, no problem. I can even eat it on an empty stomach and it doesn't affect me the way it used to.
Yeah. That's amazing. What do you think? Do you think food addiction is a brain or a biochemical issue?
That's such an excellent question, because what I've learned over the years, and this is another thing that is taught, that addiction in of itself and food addiction is only caused by one thing. That's not true. It's complex. There's several factors involved. It's not just biochemical. And one of the things I wanted to mention, there was a really important aspect of it being a mechanical issue that I learned from Dr. Iflin. I mean, she put the whole mirror neuron thing on the map, like I mentioned earlier, because we do and imitate what people do around us. So that's important. That's its own separate thing. Then you have the biochemical aspect, because I mentioned and then you have the gut microbiome issue. But we also have the issue of our nervous system getting dysregulated. That's a problem. Then we have our inner family. That's a whole other issue, and emotions. Then you have food intolerances and sensitivities. There's also trauma as well that's stored in the body, and then stress management. Right. There's so many things, and they're always discovering another aspect of it all the time. So yes, we have to work on everything. And that's one of the things that I love about Real Food Recovery Group, is because we work on all of those, all of them together. It's the most comprehensive group that I've personally been in.
That's funny you say that, because I was just getting ready to make sure I mentioned that we look at all those different things. So the next question is, do I have to avoid people, places, and things in order to avoid processed foods?
You
do I
know,
have to live in a bubble?
That's a beautiful question. In the beginning, that might be a good idea if you're in the beginning of your recovery journey.
Sure.
I'm not going to make it a rule of thumb, because everybody's different. I'm going to give you my experience. I remember when I first started recovery, I had, within the first 2 weeks of being in recovery, I was invited to a picnic. It was a big congregation picnic. We're going to have games outside, all this stuff. So I called ahead. I ate beforehand, and then I called ahead and asked what type of food was going to be there. They told me there was going to be a few different snacks there. That was it. We're going to focus on playing. Well, lo and behold, I get there. And then after half an hour being there, this one particular person, out of their being generous, they provided from all the local restaurants, they provided all this food. I mean, there was tables full of all the local restaurants' foods. And I about had a heart attack when I saw that. I'm like, why couldn't this have happened before? But that's okay, good. And that was there, and dessert tables and all of that. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Okay. So I put a podcast on. I had a headphone on, an earbud in one ear. I ate beforehand. I listened to a podcast on the way. And I was like, okay, so we started to play games. We're involved, movement, connection, having a great time. It starts pouring. I'm like, you can't write this stuff. Really? I'm new in recovery. Okay. Everybody runs underneath the overhang or whatever. They bring out a second round of food. Everybody's eating another plate of food. So I says, okay, take some deep breaths. What I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on a couple of people in the room. And I focused on a couple of disabled people, and I was helping them. And I was really connecting with them and helping them. And you know what? The sun came out. We went right back out and played, and I never thought about the food again. Nice. When I walked away from that, my self-confidence went through the roof after that. I said, if I can get through this, and I'm brand new in recovery, I can get through anything.
That's right.
I mean, the book was thrown at me with this one. This was crazy.
Well, you
But
tapped
I
into.
felt really good. And really that strengthened and was the beginning of this road that was being made, this neural pathway that was a road of recovery for me.
Yes.
If I had stayed home and avoided that, imagine it would have crippled me. Now, I'm not saying if you don't feel stable enough and you're not ready to do that, of course, don't do that. But just staying away just because there may be processed food there, it would have crippled me.
Yeah. Agreed. And isn't it interesting that all the skills you used self-talk, you used service to others, you had food skills because you ate before you arrived, you focused on movement, you looked at a spiritual connection, all the things that we talk about in our branches of recovery, you were employing back then in your early days. So good for you. I know we're at the end of the hour. Heather, thank you for your time, for your insights and your story. I'm so grateful, as Paige mentioned, so grateful. We are blessed to have you on the leadership team with us. Any final thoughts, Heather, you want to share before we close this episode?
Yes, I just want to say thank you again, both of you. You've been a gift in my life. I just want you to say, I just don't want to start crying, but seriously, just God sent you in my life right at the perfect moment. This has been an honor and a privilege. I love Real Food Recovery Group and working with you, and just, I don't know, I'm just flying right now. I just love this. And as far as my last words, just, be part of a recovery group. Connection is so important. Even when we think we don't need it and we are resisting it, we need that connection and community, because you never know, life throws us curveballs. And
so true.
It really helps us. I mean, that's why I am where I am right now, because of community.
Yeah.
And leaning on that. And we all help each other out. So that, and if you go away with one thing, please eat a diversity of plants. Please, if someone tells you to take lettuce and broccoli out and fruit, run the other way.
Yeah.
It's not good for you. I'm serious. The research is there. And self-discipline.
Yeah.
And love yourself. Love yourself. You deserve it.
Words of wisdom. Beautiful. Thank you. Paige, thank you. We will see you all on our next episode of Real Food Recovery. But if you have any questions about what we do for Real Food Recovery, not only on the podcast, but in our community, you can check us out at Real Food Recovery for you, number 4, letter U, realfoodrecoveryforyou.com. And we will see you all soon.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.